If you've been following the channel recently, you might have noticed that there were a lot of 3D printers popping up, and even more recently one popped up with a laser engraving option on it as well. Now, shortly after posting that video, I got contacted by Ortur. They are a company creating laser engraving machines. These machines are capable of engraving in many different materials and also cutting super thin materials. Now, I am simply put no expert in any of this whatsoever, but I do kind of know the basics, have been watching a lot of videos, so I did my research, but then again, I'm not a professional and nor do I really know what I'm doing. I'm just playing around with it, keeping it safe, and trying to inform you guys. So as you can see, when they asked me if I wanted to test out their new LaserMaster 2 Pro, I of course said yes, because I thought it would kind of be fun outside of the 3D printing and outside of the normal scale modeling that I do, and to show you guys what these machines are capable of and how you can integrate them into the hobby as well, with a couple of examples. So with that out of the way, first things first, let's keep a couple of safety things in mind. This is a laser engraver and or cutter, so it is basically just burning through the material, creating vapors and all sorts of nasty smells and chemical clouds that you don't want to breathe in. So be sure to be in a super well ventilated area, have a couple of windows open, have some air blowing through, also have some fresh air coming in, of course, and if you can, have an air extractor close to the working space, or at least some sort of suction in the window to push this air out. Ortur has also made an enclosure. I think it's still on pre-order at the moment. It is quite expensive and therefore optional. You could also build one yourself, simply put an extractor in it and an air hose to extract the dirty air outside, and you're pretty much good to go. So the LaserMaster 2 comes in a quite small package and therefore does require a little bit of assembly. There is an instruction manual included with the kit itself, but that absolutely sucks, to put it simple. I had to assemble and disassemble it a couple of times because I simply misread those instructions. They weren't really clear, or it was a Monday morning kind of thing and I'm simply stupid or something. But if you ask me, I didn't really like those instructions. I did like the packaging. It is really nice and compact. Everything is clearly labeled and separated, so you do know what it is. But then again, if you follow the instructions, it is quite hard to do it right the first time around. But that could also be totally my fault. So let's just leave that as it is. Now, I did find a couple of videos online which were a lot clearer than the instructions, and a bit of simple thinking and looking did help out in the end, and I was able to assemble it in about an hour or so. Also, as you can see, the machine itself basically is a frame, so there is nothing underneath it, so you will need to have a sacrificial piece underneath the machine itself. Cut it to the same width and length as the machine, and you're pretty much good to go. It is burning in this sacrificial piece, so you might need to swap and change it after a couple of uses or a couple of disastrous tries, but that is all up to you. There are various different materials you can use for this, but just be sure to know what you're using for this and not damage the underlying material like the table or maybe even the floor that is of course underneath it. Now, in order to operate the machine, you will need to download some software. There are a couple of different options. One of them is GRBL. That is available for Windows computers. I use a Mac computer, so that was not available for me, and therefore I had to use LightBurn. LightBurn does come with a 30-day free trial, and afterwards you do need to pay, I think, yearly for a subscription. I do really recommend LightBurn. I'm not sponsored by them, nor have I even been in contact with them. I've been using the software for a couple of days in their 30-day free trial, and it's really easy to use. They also have a couple videos online on their YouTube channel very clearly explaining what everything is for and giving you a really good starting point with the software. With the machine now assembled and some basics taken into consideration, the software downloaded, I tried a couple of pieces just to see how easy it was, did a couple of random things like my name, and also inserted an image of my actual logo, cut through some paper, and did another couple of tests on some of the pieces that were included in the actual kit. So just to make it really simple, there are a lot of different settings that go through a lot of different materials. You can slow down the machine so it takes longer to go over the entire image, therefore having the laser on a certain section for longer, making it a deeper burn. But also the settings can be sped up a lot so it barely touches the material, simply just leaves a small mark or a small light burn on top of it, and therefore it doesn't really go that deep into the material. So that first test piece was done. I simply then turned around the wood sacrificial piece that I have underneath it and started by putting down a grit that I found on the Ortur Facebook group that someone made, which is really handy so you know where the machine can start and go to, and actually compare it to the software on the computer, as the 0 points are now clearly marked underneath the machine so you know exactly where to place the pieces. So about 10 to 15 minutes later, and the entire grit has been cut into the sacrificial piece with all of the measurements from left to right, top to bottom, and also some extra pieces just to give a bit more information on where you need to locate your piece in order to have the cut from the computer screen transfer onto the actual piece itself. And as you can see here, just place the piece at the 0 point, and you can compare that to the one on the computer as well. Transfer the sizes, add some logos, maybe even some text or some other things you want to engrave. Then transfer the settings you want for each specific piece. Now I'm not really going to go into detail as I'm still testing myself and I'm not really that knowledgeable, just a bit of trial and error so far and a couple of successes. So if you want to learn more about this, probably join a Facebook group, watch some more videos from people that actually know what they're doing and have a lot more information on this. But overall, really easy to use as a first-time engraver pretty much, and simply just go for it, I would say. I'm really pleased so far with the first couple of test pieces, reset the machine, and went for something a bit more complicated, and that is actually cutting through the material. Now you do need to slow down the cutting rate and also probably up the power of the laser just to have a bit more power to go through it. It took a couple of tries, I failed a couple of times, had to reset it, retry it, and figure it out pretty much, as there's no set settings specifically for each material, so it's a bit of trial and error. After a couple of trials and a couple of errors, I finally figured out how it worked, and just quickly moved on to the next test piece to see what this machine was capable of. So in the machine itself, or in the packaging of the machine, there are a couple of pieces to test, a couple of wood pieces, a couple of plastic pieces, and some other things as well, so I figured I'd just go through them. One of the other small test pieces that was included in the kit was a small piece of black acrylic. Now this has some protective paper on top of it, which has a nice barrier through it to create a super nice and clean cut line. I simply just loaded up a mini logo that I found online, sized it to the shape it needed to be, positioned it of course, put down the piece, and started engraving it. After the engraving was completed, I needed to peel off the protective paper, and the engraving was pretty much finished. With that first side now completed successfully, I wanted to try a little bit more of a complicated piece on the back side. Now it turned out that the machine goes really fast and can start shaking pretty violently on these smaller detail pieces. Now I was stupid enough not to bolt it down. There are some parts included in the kit to do so. So after this fail, I had to reset the entire machine, bolted it down, also turned the sacrificial piece around again to another clean part, needed to re-engrave the entire grit that I had done before, and could then start engraving again a lot sturdier. So about an hour later, we could reset the machine, zero it again, and start all over on the other side of that part. I sanded it down, removed the earlier engraving, not completely, but it is a test piece, so I could just sand it down lightly, remove most of it, and start over. Now you could also glue down or keep the piece in place to have it even sturdier, which probably would have been a good idea with this complicated engraving job, but overall it did pretty fine and didn't really shift all that much. And with that, the backside is now also complete. The Cooper SE is nicely engraved, was really sturdy. the main outline of the car itself wasn't really all that sturdy. It did shift, so it might be a good idea to stick it down to the actual surface underneath to keep it nicely in place. One of the other pieces that was included in the kit was a small flat piece of, I think, aluminum with a black coating on top. Now basically with the engraving you simply just remove the black coating on top and you are left with the aluminum showing through and therefore revealing the logos. I thought it would be pretty cool for a build to have a custom plate engraved with either the name and logo of the car and maybe your own signature or limited edition 1 of 1, which I think would be cool to any edition on the cars itself that you built. So that's something I would consider using this for. One of the other uses that I found is that you can cut through tape, so you can make custom templates. Now it is pretty easy to mess this up, as I thought the template that I would be cutting out would be a little bit smaller, so let's call it Monday morning again. Reset, remove the tape, place a new piece of tape and size it down just a little bit, about 3 times smaller, so it actually fits on the piece of tape. I should have known that this would fit, as I do have the grit on here and on the computer, so that should match up, but that's my mess up nonetheless. Reset and re-go with a smaller piece, yeah, worked out pretty well. So just like all the other tests I have done so far, it is trial and error. I don't really know which settings to use yet to cut through it or simply just engrave it. It is different for every material, every image, and so forth. Now, I thought it would be a lot easier just to peel this off and have the template stick to the other piece of tape, but it turns out it sticks better to the wood than it does to the tape. So for now, we just have the circle, and you simply need to carefully remove the other piece for the actual template to be transferable on the part you want to paint it, of course. Now, there should probably be a lot easier methods to do this. I haven't really found them so far. You could also just double up the tape and do the engraving a little lighter so it only cuts through the top layer of tape and lightly into the layer underneath, and then you have the piece of masking tape on top of it with your template. So as you can see, I'm still learning and testing, seeing what works, but I've found a couple of things that are really useful so far and I really would like to use in the future. The machine does a great job at finer detailing and even smaller parts and pieces, as you could see in the video itself. If you are interested in purchasing one for yourself, I will be leaving links in the description to the Ortur website, and I will also be leaving links to LightBurn, Laser GRBL, and also a couple of videos online that I have found so far to be very useful and also very impressive on what you can do with this machine. Thanks again for watching the video, and I hope to see you guys next time. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below, and I'll try my best to help you guys out as much as I can.